So excited to have you back with us. Now, if you're new to this series, we speak with top marketing leaders to define their trends, pet peeves, and of course, their biggest confessions. I'm your host, Joe Escobedo, CEO and Chief Editor at Esco Media. Joining me is a friend and someone I look to for marketing inspiration. He is Nicholas Kontopoulos, who is the Vice President of Marketing, Asia Pacific and Japan at Twilio. Nicholas, good to see you again.
G'day, mate. Yeah, no, great to be here, and thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to a great conversation, buddy.
Absolutely. Now, Nicholas, let's start off with a confession. Can you think of a time where something didn't quite go to plan? Maybe it was an initiative that you were working on, but there was a valuable learning experience off the back of that.
Yeah, great question. And I was giving this a bit of thought, obviously knowing what the theme of the session was, wanting to give an insight to the audience in terms of where maybe I've got it wrong in the past, and what I've learned from that is something I'm actually quite excited to share with everyone. And when I thought about this, it would go back to my previous 2 roles back, where I was looking to set up a BDR organization in APJ. I worked for fantastic leaders. I had both from the C-suite down through to the sales leadership, both at a global and at a regional level. I was a partner in crime with these folks. I had a great relationship pretty much through and through. So when I was building out the BDR strategy and ultimately starting to roll that out, I had made some assumptions based on those relationships that just assumed that we were all 100% aligned in terms of what that BDR strategy might look like and how it might want to be implemented. And I quickly found that wasn't the case. The lesson there that I learned was I hadn't really done my due diligence in really exploring with those folk really what it was I was trying to achieve, and making sure that I had really got their inputs, clearly captured, because I'd made some assumptions based on that good working relationship I already had, that they would just be aligned with where I was heading. And it reminded me of one of my favorite business leaders of all time is a guy called Jamie Anderson, fantastic leader, someone that pretty much anyone who's ever worked with him would uniformly say he's just a natural born leader. And I remember him saying to me once, it's always good to have a healthy dose of paranoia when it comes to planning or developing a strategy, to always think about the different vectors of attack or areas that you could have maybe got wrong, and make sure you're buttoning those up by having those conversations with folks ahead of time. So it was a great example of where just assuming because you've got good working relationships with folks that you're 100% going to be aligned isn't always going to be the case, and that you really do need to put that due diligence in, not just with the folks that maybe you would identify early on as being potential blockers, but also the people that you would need to be your advocates and ultimately champions, making sure that they're fully bought into the strategy you're trying to implement, and ultimately have really helped you stress test what it is you're trying to achieve. So yeah, that would be, thankfully, I managed to recover and ultimately saw that become an incredibly successful program that went global, and I actually lived on into the next company because we got acquired and had a major impact. I did create myself some wobbles early on that I could have avoided, an unnecessary stress, I guess you could say, if I had have just done that due diligence and really thought about bringing not just my potential blockers on the journey, but also those that are natural, maybe allies that I would naturally thought would have been signed up and subscribed to what I was trying to achieve straight out of the gate. But don't make that assumption. Make sure you do that work with them, and also use that as an opportunity to stress test what it is you're trying to achieve as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice for everyone here, particularly if you're working closely with sales. I love the line of have a healthy dose of paranoia when planning. Like you said, not only identifying the people who are going to support you, but also the blockers. And I guess also perhaps looking at what are some of the questions or some of the pushback they might have, because in your mind or in our minds, it may be a perfect plan and it's going to be well executed and everything like that. But the other side, they may say, oh, okay, I'm a bit hesitant or I'm a bit anxious about this part of it or that. Do you also think through those possible scenarios when you're doing these kind of due diligence? I guess that comes to the conversation as well.
100%. I try to do my best. Obviously, there's always going to be, you can never get it 100% buttoned up, but if you put that work in and that thinking in up front, the likelihood for surprises is reduced significantly. Doesn't mean you won't come up against, obviously, it's challenges. There's always going to be, and that's good. You want people to stress test what you're trying to achieve, because at the end of the day, it will expose potential fault lines that may become really problematic downstream. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely think creating, also that's where when it comes to building your teams and making sure you're creating that culture that everyone feels empowered, not just your stakeholders, but also the folks reporting to you or you're working with, having that environment where people can, like I said, I keep using that idea of stress testing what it is you're trying to achieve. Yeah. But yeah, no, that was my sort of confession. And if I look at all other examples that I have of where things have gone wrong, typically it's because maybe done a shortcut and tried to fast track something and not done that work that needed to be done up front to avoid that pain later. So yeah, again, it's a muscle that I've tried to build into how I approach my roles. Again, it's something I think if you can start doing that early on in your career and getting really strong at building that in, it's only going to help you accelerate you getting to the successes you want to get to.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I've been in the same situation where I didn't do the same due diligence before, and it really caused a lot of, like you said, unnecessary stress and heartache. And we're like, okay, why isn't this initiative moving? When the fact is we didn't get the key stakeholders buy-in, or they weren't completely convinced. And so they dug their heels into the ground and were like, I don't really want to do this, or this, a lot of pushback. So I can definitely relate to that. I think a lot of folks can as well too. So good advice for everyone. Nick, I've known you for several years now. You had a very interesting career, to say the least. Now, I won't give everyone the whole kind of preview, but I'd love to hear, how did you get from where you started to where you are now as VP of marketing? What was that career journey like?
I've actually been very fortunate and blessed in terms of what I've had in terms of opportunities. And I knew coming out of high school I wanted to go into business, but I bombed at high school. Yeah, I'm quite open with this. I failed my HSC, and I remember for 3 months wallowing in self-pity. Oh, I'm a failure and all of this. And my father, who's a restaurateur, chef, he was a successful businessman, after 3 months said, all right, son, you've got two choices. You get back into the saddle and go back to school and reset your exams, or go and get a job. And because you need to start working. So I picked the latter. But so that was in itself, I remember embarking out on trying to find a role, but I never really had and I can say that I've never had a clear sort of, here are the 5-10 steps I'm going to do in terms of getting to where am today. All I knew is that I wanted to be in business. I found myself in sales quite quickly. I started off as an insurance underwriter and a commercial underwriter, and then moved into sales. Loved the interaction with people. And I knew that's what I wanted to be in. I wanted to be involved with working with people and ideas and solving problems, and helping customers achieve their goals, and working within a teaming environment and a collaborative environment. Those are things I learned early on that I wanted to be a part of. And that then quickly, as I moved through sort of the early stages of my career, I got really interested in people, process, and technology. I was often involved in technology transformation projects. IT would come to me and asked me for my inputs to be one of the end users testing technology. So I saw a lot of those projects failing over my career. And because, again, often, even though they were collecting inputs, they weren't listening to those inputs and applying them into technology rollouts. So I started to see patterns where businesses were tripping up on driving transformation by not really thinking in terms of people, process, technology. And that also played out in terms of me seeing how sales and marketing roles and as business units weren't working. So I got a natural interest in also, how do we improve the dynamic between sales and marketing? And that's what led to me going into sales. I actually did a business development, which is, I always think, is a good hybrid between sales and marketing. A good BD person knows both those worlds, sales and marketing. And that helped transition me into the marketing side of the house. And that was when I moved into the technology sector. That was the period where I moved into technology, and I started to see the importance of marketing and sales coming together, the absolute necessity for that if you are going to be world class at what you do, marketing and sales and customer success for that matter, all have to be working together in unison. Yeah, that's what led to me coming into sort of marketing, and ultimately to the role I'm in today, is just a natural interest in people and how they interact and how they solve problems, how they can create value for one another. So again, a good, obviously, relationship between any customer and a business selling to them is one that has mutual benefit. And and just a genuine interest in looking at how we can drive positive change for our customers. So again, that was why I guess I've always really enjoyed sales and marketing, because you're obviously at the tip of the spear in that respect, in helping drive that. hopefully that gives you some insights in terms of what you're looking for.
Yes, absolutely. I know I was going to say, I appreciate you being so candid with your educational background. And I think a lot of folks we have some senior stakeholders joining us today, and we have some ones that are probably new in the marketing world. And many think that, okay, they had to do, perfect on their academic scores. They had to go to the best schools. They have to have a very clear career plan to get to basically where you are, a VP of marketing. But I appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's a good example for everyone that people go through different paths in life, and there's not always one straight path to success. And I appreciate you taking us through the different roles in sales and business development and now in marketing. And so it's a good reminder for, I think, all the younger folks who are joining us.
100%. I would say and encourage them to put themselves out into environments that aren't comfortable. And I think that's something I've done through my career. I've changed industries. I've moved I've lived in Europe, China, Singapore now. So that's something I think has been a great asset to me in helping me evolve. And I encourage that with the younger folks I work with in my teams or in my network, is to pick up sticks and throw yourself into an environment that isn't familiar, because it forces you to become more adaptive. You have to. You got no choice. You've done it, but you're the same. You followed a similar trajectory in your career. I think that it only adds value. You don't have to do that if that's not your path or what you're drawn to. You can still succeed and achieve success through different paths, but it is one that I do encourage, is that especially if you want to move into regional and global roles, getting that rounded experience by moving across different industries, different geographies, is only going to help enrich you, I think.
Absolutely. I completely concur. Like I said, I have a very similar background of living in several different countries and working in several different industries. And it does open your mind to how different industries operate, the similarities. You can get key learnings from that. So when I started my career, I was doing comms with Nike, Mercedes-Benz. So I still try to use those examples in even doing B2B in terms of positioning and messaging and things like that. Absolutely agree. And last time we were talking about, because a lot of younger professionals, I'll raise my hand for this, when I was guilty of this, is being very guilty of chasing maybe titles that they thought were impressive, or maybe chasing the most money early on. But you had an interesting take on that.
Yeah, and I'm a Gen X. That's where I sit. So you can put I'm 51. Yeah, so I'm pretty open with that. I come through a generation of, we had a lot of change. Yeah, we went through actually a lot of the technology changes. We had to adapt all the way through that and constantly evolve. But we also got the best of both worlds of technology, but also some of the old ways of doing things in terms of what were the core principles of how you would be successful. Like my dad, you always said to me, because he was, like I said earlier, ran those restaurants, treat a company like it's your own, own business. This is a great foundational principle, one that I encourage everyone to, the young ones that are coming into a company, if they're starting with a Twilio or another major tech company, treat that company like it's your own, operate with that mindset. Think of it as being your business, and how you invest your time and dollars if you're controlling budgets. So how do you make sure you get a best return on that? But also think about your career in terms of not titles and salary. Obviously, you want to make sure you're getting paid a fair salary. That's a given, yeah. But again, if someone comes along and offers you an extra $5,000 on what you're getting, you shouldn't be looking at it. I learned that lesson early in my career, yeah, not to chase the money, because at the end of the day, it's more about what you're being exposed to, i.e. the people you're working with. If you're working with great talent, people that have got great knowledge, subject matter expertise that you can learn from, especially in your earlier stages of your career, be a sponge, soak that up, really use that as an opportunity to further your knowledge base and increase your repertoire of skill sets that you can then obviously later market and ultimately cash in on when the time is right. But yeah, I really would say, don't really think of your career in terms of titles and salaries, especially early on. As long as you're getting a fair salary, you look at more through the lens of the people you're going to work with and the experience you're going to get. And that to me is what I encourage, and certainly how I've approached my career, to be quite honest. So, like I said, I learned 27, I had my salary tripled. And I remember I was working for a tier 1 company, and they said, Nick, you're great, but you're not worth that. We'll give you a little bit of a bump, but we believe you're getting exposed to the best people and the best ideas. And I was like, no, I'm worth 3x what I'm getting paid now. And I honestly, within a day of starting that new job, I knew I'd made a mistake. Yeah, I just left a world-class team and went to a tier 3 where I wasn't getting that same level of exposure. So yeah, that'd be my advice. Think of it in terms of the people you're going to get to work with, the experience you're getting exposed to, and look at it through that lens. Is that along the lines what you're looking for there, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate you sharing that because I'm definitely going to share this advice with my students who are maybe entering their career and trying to figure out their path. And so I think this is super valuable advice if you get this early on, even if you're older in your career. Sometimes you don't learn this till later in life. I know I didn't. So I appreciate you sharing that. Now that we talked about your past, let's talk about the current. I'd love to hear about something in marketing that's getting you excited. Could be a trend or maybe something you're working on.
Oh yeah, from God, that's a hard one because lots gets me excited. As you most know, I'm quite an excitable person. What I'm getting excited about is, like I said, that the move to building marketing and sales and customer success organizations that work in harmony, that are operating as truly one. That to me is magical when you can achieve that, really, because it does ultimately lead to not just only better customer experiences, but also better employee experiences. And again, the former is very dependent on the latter. Yeah. If you've got a great culture, great operating model where for most of the part of the day, everyone's excited to be working with one another. There's always going to be the times we're going to have fallouts, etc. But if you can get a healthy culture where all those functions are working together, it can create a really, like I said, a magical sort of environment that really does drive meaningful change for businesses. For me, I really am quite keen from a marketing lens, especially now we're entering what is going to be a difficult period. If we look at the global economic environment we're entering into, is the real need for marketing, which is something I've been passionate about for a number of years now, is not only looking at top line growth, but also the impact we have on a bottom line, from a bottom line perspective. I think this is really important for marketing leaders. It's, again, not a new idea, not a new concept. Loads of people talk about it, but often it gets hard to implement when it comes to just the day-to-day noise that we have to deal with. But I think creating a culture where everyone in the team understands the importance of the impact we're making, both at the top and bottom line, is quite important. And again, that must involve us working closely with the other folks that are involved in helping drive that transformational change. And in particular, that's going to be, like I said, the marketing and customer success teams in the technology sector. And really, I see marketing's role, especially when it comes to customer experience and even in terms of employee experience, it plays a role in that as well, in helping orchestrate that strategy. We don't own it. I don't think anyone really owns it. I think the employees and ultimately the CEO of a company owns the overall strategy but in helping or make that become a reality, I think marketing can play a really influential role in orchestrating that strategy in partnership with those other folks that are required to move the needle in the direction we go.
Yeah, interesting because you mentioned conveying the impact the different teams and individuals have had on, say, revenue, the bottom line. But how do you best convey that when you're working with, like you said, marketing, sales, and customer service?
So say that again. Sorry, Joe, I
Yeah.
missed that one.
So yeah, the question was around how do you convey the impact that either the individuals or the teams are having on, say, revenue or the bottom line? How do you
Yeah.
share impact they're having to get them motivated or get them going?
The way I'm framing it in terms of it as a concept, and again, not a new concept, I think I talk about it in terms of the idea of brand to revenue. Yeah. So how do we all, again, that's the umbrella idea of what, again, it's not just marketing. This is everyone coming together. How do we elevate and create brand awareness, but also drive that all the way through to revenue? And again, that as a concept, as an idea, is hopefully we can rally around in terms of as a team and thinking about, because everyone plays a role. It's not just marketing, it has an impact on brand. A salesperson can have a massive impact today on brand. Again, you and I have talked a lot about this, about social selling. You get a sales guy going wild, or he and she can actually create a lot of damage to the brand in the way they use their social selling approaches. Customer success, same, obviously. So everyone plays a role in that, in owning the brand and the responsibility of helping drive the brand. But that's why, again, I think marketing can play a role in orchestrating that. So yeah, having a unifying sort of strategy around this idea, this notion of brand to revenue, I think is a good way of approaching it. And whenever we talk about the business, we think of it in that lens. How is the engine, the demand engine that we're creating, working and operating and supporting that brand to revenue vision and strategy? I think, and what's the role of everyone in that, and having a really clear understanding of how the components come together to power that engine, I think is really important. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think pre-COVID, I kept hearing the brand to demand narrative. Now, during COVID and post-COVID, you hear a lot more of the brand to revenue. And I've seen a lot of senior marketers even have their titles or roles change from head of demand gen, for example, to head of revenue or revenue generation or whatever it is. What do you think the impact that is for marketers going forward? Do you see that trend continuing even past when the economy is dipping? If so, how do they navigate that?
I definitely think changing a title and actually implementing is two different things. So again, maybe I don't mean to offend anyone that's changed their title, but again, what's key there is that you actually drive home that idea, that concept. Yeah. So you need to be really, like I said, you need to build partnerships with the folks that are required to ultimately make that happen. There's a lot of hard work, and you're not going to do this in one quarter. This is a several-year journey. If I think about the time, and I haven't mastered it by a long mile. A lot of what I'm talking about today, have I implemented it? Have I seen successes? 100. But each time I've done this, I'm learning from that experience and then looking at how can I adapt it. Like now coming to Twilio, I'm looking at taking my learnings from my previous companies and adapting that and evolving that thinking. So again, it's always evolving. This is the cool thing about operating in today, is that you can't get bored. The world's always changing. Whether we're going from a pandemic now to financial downturns, this is the thing. You have to be agile. You have to be fluid and have again, trying to drive a unified approach across the core functions that need to deliver on that vision is absolutely critical, because otherwise you all spin out in different directions, and then that's when it becomes a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely wise words. So, Nicholas, I know you have a lot of experience in the tech space now with Twilio. I'm curious to get your thoughts on how do you think technology is impacting the customer engagement space nowadays?
Yeah, for most people that know me, they'll know that I'm a complete geek when it comes to anything to do with customer experience. Yeah, it's something I'm very passionate about. I don't purport to be a technologist, even though I'm in the technology industry. I've got a lot of smart people behind me that can geek out and talk specifically around the technologies and what they can do individually. But what I look at is how do you bring and create strategies that harness bringing people, process, and technology together. That sort of draws back on my earlier statements around my career and how it evolved. Is I'm really fascinated about how you bring these three core components together. Again, not a new idea. It's been around for ages, but and almost cliche in saying that. But often I find we forget the meaning behind that cliche statement. We've lost sight of why it became the idea it is, and we have to revisit it and double click it. And often what I find is customers aren't really thinking through their technology purchases through that lens. They need to think about how they bring people to process technology together. Even today, I see a lot of clients getting it wrong. So when we think about technology, I really encourage people to think about it through those lenses in terms of how do we bring this all together. But the cool thing is technology is enabling a lot of things that we could only have imagined 5 years ago. So when we think about this, what machine learning and AI can do for us, it is really driving a huge transformation in the ability for, let's say, marketers to really look at how they can surface up ideas in an accelerated fashion, but also then put them into action quite quickly. Think of it in the concept of personalization. We've had a lot of talk about personalization over the last 5-6 years, really important. Actually, table stakes now pretty much is the ability for you to do a personalized experience. But I think that's not enough. We have to move beyond personalization and really start thinking about individualization. And how do I individualize that experience? Where it makes sense. Obviously, you can't do it everywhere. It's just physically impossible for you to do it. But really understanding what are those moments where it's going to make the highest impact for a customer, for a prospect. And that's where I think technology can play a huge role in helping your ability to scale that. But just deploying technology alone won't solve that. You need to really think about the processes, the people that need to be either retrained or even retooled or reorganized in a way that can actually enable you to move to the next level. So that's where, again, at Twilio, we get quite excited when I came here that they've got this ability to build. We talk about, we can't wait to see what you build. And I love that as a concept because, again, I think you have to have a builder's mindset to really drive successful customer experience transformation. And you got to think of building a building and the architecture and the design and all of the elements that go into that. So I think I would encourage those that wanting to drive transformational change to try to develop a builder's mindset and think of themselves as digital architects in terms of how they approach this. But yeah, I think also the other thing I like to talk a lot about is this notion of brand utility. And again, looking at how I move from since a lot of the folks that will be listening today are marketers, really stop and move away from the classical broadcast type approach. Look at me, look how great I am. Again, not a new idea, it's been around for a while, but really being more of a service orientated mindset, being an orientated marketer, and how we create, and that can be everything through the type of content we create, through to the tools we create that really help people derive a utility from that they see that actually creating value, helping them get better at what they do. I think if you do that, then you're moving in the right direction of creating an amazing customer engagement strategy that really does drive a meaningful customer experience that transcends just to being seen as an exchange of dollars. Yeah, that people see, oh wow, this company's really helped me move forward in the direction I want to go, and whether that's in a B2C or B2B context. Yeah, obviously in the B2C you got more commoditized products. It gets harder to think about how you might deliver such a utility, but there are great examples out there of even simple commoditized type products where the companies have invested in helping create a utility. Yeah, and I'm sure we can all think of those if we put our thinking caps on. But yeah, that's some thoughts from me in terms of how I think about technology and the role it's playing. I guess to summarize there, sorry, it's a very long answer to a simple question. Don't treat technology as a diet pill. This would be my key advice. Technology is absolutely critical to your ability to drive transformational change in your business. Absolutely, I would believe that and know that, having been on the client side and now on the vendor side. But technology on its own will not solve all the problems. So don't treat it like a diet pill. Think about that end experience that you're trying to drive, the role of people, process, and technology, that the roles that they will play in helping you drive that transformational change will be critical.
Good advice, because I think, like you said, a lot of people think of technology as a silver bullet that's going to come in and fix all their problems overnight, which, as we know, is not the case. But there's so many folks doing it day in, day out. And last time we were talking about a example to kind of illustrate some of the points you were talking about around individualization, around brand utility, around a fitness app that you use. So maybe you can share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, my wife used to be a fitness trainer, and I remember her starting to use it, and I ultimately started to use the Under Armour Fitness. They had a great app that enabled you to go in there and you could set your goals and your targets as to what you wanted to achieve in terms of weight loss or fitness levels, etc. And you start using that app, and it actually quickly becomes a tool you're spending a lot of time in each day or every time you exercise. And if you think about it, it's quite a personal interaction, because I'm sharing quite personal information about my health, my goals, and what I'm trying to achieve. I'm sharing that with a company. Yeah, I'm actively sharing that. But the reason I'm doing that is because there's a utility. There's a utility in that app. It's actually creating value for me. So I'm sharing this exchange of information with the brand that is creating value for me. Yeah, and that's why this idea of brand utility, it's a great example of brand utility. I start to build an affinity with that brand. I start buying their shoes. I start wearing their clothes. And why do I do that? Because I've started to have a brand loyalty aspect being built into that. I'm starting to see that. Now, the company can also use that data intelligently to then also tailor its offers to me based on the seasons. So, hey, Nicholas, I noticed you're doing our count in terms of how many steps you've had or how many miles you've run. We know your shoes are most really coming up, need replacing soon, so that we ensure that you don't damage your feet or your knee joints, etc. They can come up with smart ways of engaging with me, saying, hey, by the way, we've got this 10% discount on the same shoes that you bought, or here's a rain jacket you can use on your outdoor walks. So you can see how you can use that information to start then individualizing the experience in a way that's not intrusive, not I'm being sold to, but something that feels more natural. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about when we think about brand utility. So think about your products, the services you offer. How can you create that type of utility for a customer in what you do is ultimately, I think, the holy grail now for a lot of us. And that's certainly something I want to look at doing myself more of going forward as well.
Absolutely. We're getting some great questions from the audience. So we'll go ahead and ask those. Darren asks, you mentioned the economic downturn. What's your advice on getting more marketing budget from CFOs?
What's my advice for getting more budget from CFOs? Build a fantastic partnership with them. See them as a business partner. See your finance folks that you're working with as a strategic component to your overall strategy. And how do you do that? Build that relationship, build trust with them, help them see the value you're creating. Be an ROI-focused marketer. Again, a lot of us talk about it. A lot of us say, you hear a lot of people talk about that. but actually put that into action. Really measure your pipeline through to revenue. I'm very passionate about that. At the end of the day, my two KPIs for my team are pipe creation and revenue generation. Everything else is secondary to that. Obviously, there's different KPIs and metrics used to support the different functions that are driving to that. But the end goal for everyone in my org is, what impact are we making on the bottom line? And that helps drive not only a seat at the table with finance, but also your sales leaders, etc. Yeah. So it's really, I think if you do that, it has a broader positive impact for you across the business. It helps you earn a seat at the table, you know. But yeah, build that relationship with the finance team. They're really important, especially for me in the last few roles I've been in. You get halfway through the quarter, and then all of a sudden there's an incremental budget being made available. The teams that tend to get that are the ones that are showing the best return. Like a finance guy was sitting there, he's like a VC. Nicholas is delivering me really great returns. I'd be best to give him the budget versus Samantha, who's not had a great result, or Joey, who's not had a great result. Yeah. And so I think that's where, if you try to approach it that way, in my experience, it tends to work in your favor, especially when new budgets are coming online, or when you're going to ask for something that's outside of what's currently budgeted for. Equally is important. Yeah. Is that what you were looking for, mate?
Yeah. Darren, hopefully that answers your question. I like the idea of thinking of them as VCs and them trying to get the best return on their investment. So obviously they're going to give more budget to those folks. So Darren, hopefully that answers your question. Michelle asked, "Hey, Nicholas, thank you for sharing your insights with us today. You mentioned CSM, marketing, and sales all need to work together to drive success. However, a lot of companies, it can be challenging to get all the stakeholders working together. Do you have any tips or advice here?" Great question, Michelle.
100%.
Any thoughts on this?
It's a great question, and I'll give a recent example. So I just ran my first APJ marketing offsite. It was actually on site. It was at our Singapore office, but it was all of the team coming together. And in that was not just marketing folks. I had people from the analytics team. I had people from BDR organizations, sales, etc., comms, all coming together with the view of looking at where have we come from and where do we want to go. So I engaged a great external facilitator, innovator, SG. If anyone wants to look them up, they came in and worked with me and my team take us on a journey of looking at, like I said, where we've come from and where we're going to go, and then start mapping out what are our objectives. What does our happiness island look like? Literally is one of the objectives we had. If we get to Happiness Island, what does that look like? What does it look like for marketing? What does it look like for sales? What does it look like for customer success team? So I really encourage, I'm a big fan of design thinking as a concept, as a problem solving methodology. Bring people in. If you haven't got that skill in-house, bring someone in that can help use those types of tool sets to help drive that change. But most importantly, bring all of those folks that you need to take on a journey into that same room. And everyone comes in on the basis of it being a safe space. It's not all ideas are good ideas in the sense that we're going to put them up on the board, and the best ideas will surface to the top through a process of discussion and interaction. And that's where, again, Joe, it's quite interesting. I've been thinking about this a lot over the last few months. The human interaction is such an important part of this mix. Yeah. So we've spent the last 2 years like this in digital format, which is fantastic and amazing. Actually, again, that in itself has been amazing to watch. But there is something to be said about human contact and being in person. Yeah. It's an incredibly powerful vehicle to really move quickly in getting ideas and people connecting and generating a really, cool new ideas. So I really do encourage, if you can, where possible, to try to create that environment in person. Doesn't mean it has to be that way. You can still do them effectively in a virtual format. I've done that many times. But yeah, that was something, Joe, I thought about like recently. Having the whole team in that space, in a common space, was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good advice for Michelle, kind of bringing everyone on the ship that's together with you, that's going to be involved in that process, that journey. So thank you so much. Great question, Michelle. Rohan asked, what resource has had the biggest impact on your career so far?
What resource? So are we thinking like in terms of like individuals that have influenced me and the like?
Yeah, it could be individuals, correct.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Or two. Okay. So there's 3 people that spring to mind that have often get referenced by me in my talks, etc. Gary Hamel is a fantastic business management thinker. He's been around for a while. The first book I read of his, which always sticks with me, is Leading the Revolution. So he talks about the importance of revolutionizing the way we manage our businesses. Most of the principles and frameworks that we use that run our businesses were designed in a different era. Like they were designed in the 19th and 20th century, believe it or not. Yeah. So he talks a lot about the need to break down some of those concepts and reimagine how we organize ourselves around our customers. So very good thinker. Seth Godin's another one. His book, Unleashing the Idea Virus, fantastic book. Also paired with Tribes, I think it is. Those two books, read them together back to back. I love those books. Have really influenced me about how do you take an idea and put it into action and ultimately have that start to spread, and the importance of building tribes. Back to Michelle's earlier question, building a tribe, cross-functional people all marching in the same direction is a really important thing to do. And I think those two books can be a really good feeder into that. And then the last but not least is Martin Lindstrom. Actually, I'm going to be working with him again next month here in Singapore. So for those, keep your eyes open. If you're based in Singapore, we're going to have a session where he'll be presenting in person. But he's an amazing thinker, someone who's really influenced me as well over my career. He's got two great books. I've just read his recent one, Common Sense, which is a must read. And Brandwashed is another one that really influenced me. So he's a great thinker. He's very good at talking about what it takes to drive an innovative culture. How do you drive innovation? So yeah, fascinating guy. So those would be the three names that spring to mind.
Okay, awesome. Rohan, it sounds like you have a lot of reading to catch up on. Serene asked a more tactical question. She says, what's your most successful marketing channel or tool these days?
That's a great question. And a few things tumble into my mind. I'm not currently using them at the moment, but that may change. But I'm a massive fan of their solution. And I'm not being paid to say this, but that'll be on 24 without a doubt. This platform we're using is a fantastic way of building an ability to reach significant numbers of folks and ultimately deliver them what I think is an important experience, content consumption experience. So yeah, on 24, fantastic tool. Then if you think about that on its own was great. What you do with that, a tool like on 24 or Drift is another one that I'm a big fan of, is integrating those tools into a great platform like Marketo and ultimately Salesforce, and integrating those technologies so that you're capturing and surfacing those insights up and then be able to use those insights to drive actionable change in your organization that builds towards what I spoke a lot about earlier, to the ability for you then to create a really great brand utility type experience is really critical. So how you integrate those tools and technologies is going to be really important. And then having the people the technologies alone are useless if you don't have the right people. Yeah. So again, you've got to hire the right people that know how to get the best out of those tools and integrate those tools. And then use that as a chance, as I said earlier, to reimagine the processes and the way you will have that data captured and flow through the organization and have it actioned is going to be the next key things to think about.
Awesome. I'm sure the On 24 team will be very happy to hear your response, and everyone
that was watching. That wasn't paid for.
Not paid for. Just to be clear, guys.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of it. So it is a genuine statement. Those that know me, I'm pretty straight up when it comes to what I recommend. I don't recommend things lightly. So yeah, it's a great platform.
Awesome. Keep the questions coming, guys. We have a few more in, so we'll try to answer those. Sharon asks, if you had 10x the budget you have now, what would you spend it on? It's an interesting question, Sharon. What are your thoughts on it, Nicholas?
Yeah, budget. Everyone, those that have managed budgets will know this. Having a huge budget but not having the people that are needed to spend it is useless. Actually, you need great people, whether that's your agency partners or your in-house teams. You really need to make sure you've got a great team, to be able to spend that money effectively. So for me, it's really starting with building a good team, whether that's your direct team in terms of those that you hire, but also the partnerships that you build around that. For those, again, that know me, I'm very passionate about building customer experience ecosystems. Yeah. And so for me, agencies that I work with are very critical components of that. I would look at making sure that budget is being spent in building the best possible team, and then ultimately using the remaining element of that budget to create, again, content that sort of hopefully drives towards that brand utility goal that I've talked about. That's something I want to practice what I preach, and that's certainly what I'm going to be trying to do now that I'm at Twilio, is moving in that direction and building out a utility offering to my customers that hopefully helps them drive transformational change successfully in their organizations.
Wonderful. We have a couple more time for a couple more questions, guys. Philip has one around KPIs, and I think we've touched on KPIs. You mentioned pipeline generation, revenue generation, and KPIs you look at your team. His question was around what are the marketing KPIs your CEO is looking at regularly?
It's going to be the same. It's going to be pipeline, revenue, and profitability. Yeah, so that's the big one now. Yeah, and I think all tech vendors, if you're in the tech sector, actually every company, doesn't matter what industry you're in, profitability. How am I growing my business? Maintaining 30% growth rate whilst also driving an improvement in our margins. Yeah, because that's the end of the day how, if you're a publicly listed company, how you're going to be certainly valued by the analyst firms and ultimately by the market. So I think a CEO is going to want to have a clear line of sight on, have I got a healthy pipeline so that I can again talk to analysts about saying, here's our growth, what our growth is looking like. Is that translating into revenue? And if it is, it profitable revenue? So I think those are the three that I would imagine most CEOs would care about.
Awesome. And I think it goes back to your point earlier about thinking like a business owner, because when you think like a business owner, you're definitely thinking about profitability among everything else. Otherwise, 100%. You don't really have a business in mind. Great questions, guys. We're getting short on time. Probably have one more question. Let's see. Rahul asked, if you could ask one question to 100 of your peers, what would you ask them? Ooh, interesting one, Rahul. What do you think about that, Nicholas?
It's a great question. For me, it's going to be customer behaviors. What are they seeing? What changes are they seeing in how customers are behaving? Because that's a really key input. And the reality is customers are constantly evolving. How are they consuming content? What type of content? What platforms they're using? What channels? All of those things are quite critical. And behaviors can change quite quickly. Yeah, as each new technology comes out, each new way of consuming content comes out, that has an impact on customer behavior. So again, yeah, I really would be keen to hear, not just in my industry, but other industries, what behavior changes they're seeing, and then considering what that might mean for me and my business. Great question. Yeah.
Yeah, great question. I think a great response. I think we'll have to include that question in our upcoming episodes of CMO Confessions. Now, I know we are right at the end. So Nicholas, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all of your insights and stories with us. I found it super valuable. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, my friend, and absolute pleasure to be here again. And thanks to you and the team at On24 for creating content that definitely is hopefully creating utility for folks out there, and certainly does for me when I consume it. So again, really appreciate it, and proud to be part of this program. So thank you very much, team.
Yeah, thank you so much for the kind words. Really appreciate that. Now, as always, guys, thank you so much for joining us as well. We would love to get your feedback, so please take the time to complete the survey that will pop up after the event. And if you enjoyed today's episode, which I'm sure you did, there's plenty more where that came from on the CMO Confessions Hub, where you can check out all our previous episodes. So like I said, if you enjoyed today's episode, check out that hub. And thank you guys so much for your time, all your great questions, your engagement. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you on the next episode of CMO Confessions, powered by On24. Thanks so much, guys. Take care.
Ciao, everyone. Bye-bye.